Welcome to the inaugural episode of MFRW Bayside Chats, where we honor and highlight the Republican women in Maryland. Our first guest is Audrey Scott. She's a former mayor of Bowie, former county council member in Prince George's County, the former secretary of the Department of Planning, and was even the chairman of the MDGOP. So thank you, Audrey, for joining us today.
My pleasure. I'm looking forward to the interview.
Thank you. First question for you is just to describe a little bit about what you've done in your political career.
Wow. Well, I'll do a real thumbnail sketch. I started out on the Bowie City Council. That was my first election. And then I was elected mayor for 3 terms. And then I went and I had a political appointment with the President Reagan and President Bush. So I was in Washington for 12 years, 8 years with Reagan, 4 years with Bush. And that was a presidential appointment, and that was an experience that was a once in a lifetime. My secretary at HUD the last 4 years was Jack Kemp, and he was an absolute dream to work for. A very, very bright man. We called him the White Tornado because he had a new idea every day that we had to respond to, and it was a great thrill to be involved in that administration. And then from there, I was elected to the Prince George's County Council, and they have term limits, but I was reelected, and so I served 8 years on the Prince George's County Council. I was the only Republican on the council, and my colleagues elected me vice chair, which was a real honor and a tribute, and showed that we worked together. And it was a time in our culture and our country that was a common thing, and it's hopefully we'll get back there someday soon.
Absolutely.
And then I term limited, and that election when I term limited was the election where Bobby Ehrlich was elected governor, and so the next day I got a call from Bobby Ehrlich telling me that I would be Secretary of Planning. So that, again, was 4 years of this most remarkable experience. It was really a wonderful experience. And that was really the end of my political career per se until Larry Hogan got elected. And Larry Hogan appointed me to the Maryland Automobile Insurance Commission, and I served there for 8 years. So again, it's been a wonderful, wonderful journey. A fantastic experience, and each one brought a different dimension and experience to my life that was something that I am very, very grateful for.
Yes, absolutely. An incredible career you've had, Audrey. So you are not originally from Maryland.
No, I'm not. I'm from Massachusetts. I grew up north of Boston, and I was very careful to say north because in Massachusetts we don't say our R's. But anyway, I've lost some of the accent. People tell me I still have it. So,
yeah, but what brought you to Maryland?
Well, actually, I got married, and my husband worked for DOD, NSA, and so we moved to Maryland after we were married. But actually, I met him in Japan. He was a civilian, I was a civilian. I was a teacher with the Overseas Dependent School System. And I taught in France for 2 years, and then I transferred to Japan for 2 years, met John, got married. We had our first child, Lawrence, in Japan. Then we were transferred to England, and we had our next 2 children, Brian and Kenny, in England. And then we moved to Bowie, and our last child, Eddie, was born in the States.
Okay, Audrey, so when you moved to Bowie, what made you want to run for mayor?
Well, actually, it wasn't on my radar screen. It wasn't anything I had really planned to do, but I've become very involved in the community, chairing an effort to build a hospital in Bowie. Bowie was a very young family population. I had 4 young children, and it was like Fertile Valley. And after the 3rd trip to Prince George's Hospital, where they had a trauma center, and the emergencies were, gunshot wounds and horrible car accidents, and I was there with a 3-year-old who had a split lip, and so I realized we really needed something closer to home and something more relevant to our community. So we did get our CON approved, and the CON is the Certificate of Need to build a hospital or any medical facility, and we were approved for 176 beds. And a month after we were approved, the state imposed a statewide moratorium on new beds because they felt that the Washington-Baltimore area was overbedded. And what was happening was the hospital beds were in the major metropolitan areas like Baltimore and Washington, but they hadn't followed out with the population as it moved out into the suburbs. So they wanted to do an overall review and assessment of where the beds should actually be. So they put a moratorium on us and we weren't allowed to build the beds, but they didn't say we couldn't build everything else. So we built everything else. We built the surgical center, we built the emergency room, and we just built everything else. And we became really the first freestanding emergency center in the state, and maybe on the East Coast. And it was really a miracle, but it was also very, very good as far as planning, because at the same time, laser surgery was coming into its own, and fewer beds were needed because a lot of the operations were strictly in and out, which they hadn't done before. So we were right on the cutting edge of medical technology, and we didn't even realize it. So it was very, very fortunate, and it was a great experience too. It was a wonderful, but my name became known in the community. I had knocked on every door. We had to show community support. We had to show medical support in obtaining the CON. And so people started saying, Audrey, run for mayor, run for mayor, run for this, run for that. And so I ran for city council, which I thought was perhaps the first step. And I was elected to the city council, which was a 2-year term. But I only stayed for 1 term because after I got on the city council and I became more familiar with the procedures and operations and who was doing what and who wasn't doing what, I decided that I should run for mayor. And so I ran for mayor. I didn't complete my term on the council because the mayor's election was run every other year, so that the council members were elected 1 year, the mayor was elected on an off year. So I ran for mayor the next year and I won, and then I was reelected 3 more times.
Wow.
So that's how I became mayor of Bowie.
Yeah. So you definitely accomplished a bigger feat when you ran for county council and was eventually elected the vice chair of the Prince George's County Council. So could you describe a little bit of kind of what you went through and the relationships you made to be able to achieve that? Again,
I had been on the in Washington, D.C. I was at HUD as General Deputy Assistant Secretary. You know, they have big names, but in Washington, D.C. Everything's an acronym, and my acronym was GDAS. So, but I didn't publicize that too much. But anyway, there was a big issue brewing in Bowie at that time. The turf farm, which had been a major feature of the community, very rural, a turf farm, acres and acres and acres of green grass, suddenly sold and was being developed into over 1,200 homes. And they hadn't included any upgrades to Route 450. And so I thought that was just outrageous, as did most of the community. And again, people were saying, Audrey, we're not having any representation on the county council. Our representative was a great guy, but he lived in Greenbelt. We didn't have anybody on the county council from Bowie. We had previously, but at that particular time, we didn't have anyone from Bowie on the county council. So people said, Audrey, you have got to run. You've got to run. And so I ran. Now, the interesting thing is, that was my first race as a partisan candidate, because when I ran in Bowie for council and for mayor, they were nonpartisan. There's no D or R behind your name. And so I was already a known factor. And so people say, how did you get elected as a Republican in Prince George's County? And I say, because I was already a proven factor. People knew me as Audrey Scott. They didn't know me as Audrey Scott Republican or Audrey Scott Democrat or whatever. They just knew me as Audrey Scott. And this is a good advice for anybody. Name recognition has a lot to do with victory. And when people go into the polls and they see a name they recognize, they're more likely to vote for that person than a name that they don't know. So people say, all the brochures you get, all the road signs and the and also bumper stickers, all of that is to promote a name in a campaign so that when people do go into the polling place, it's a name they recognize. So my name was very, very, very well known. I had good name recognition, and I was elected as a Republican. So that was, I think, if I hadn't been mayor, obviously, I would never have been elected county council. And the nice part of county council was my second term, when I ran for re-election, the Democrats didn't put up anyone against me. So it was just, there was no one else on the ballot. It was just me. So I had raised a lot of money thinking I was going to have a real battle. And I had done fundraisers and mailings and all you do to raise money for a campaign. And that was the year Ellen Sauerbrey was running for governor. So what I did is, you can use your money for campaigns. You don't have to use it for your own campaign, which I also didn't realize but discovered. And so I did a statewide mailing for Ellen Sauerbrey with my campaign money that year. And I still think that she won that election. But anyway, that's what I did, and she's still a dear, dear friend. Yeah.
So Audrey, you have led an incredible career with a lot of things that you've accomplished and a lot of different positions you've held at pretty much every level of government. So what are some of your stories within those positions that you would say were kind of funny or humorous?
Well, there's a lot to pick and choose. One of them, and I think almost everyone who knows me knows this story, and it was in the winter, in January or February, and I got a call from a girlfriend who was in Florida, and her husband was away on business, and she called me, and there was a really wicked snowstorm here in Maryland, and she said, Audrey, why don't you come down for the weekend, just a long weekend? And I said, oh, in the middle of everything, I don't know, if I can get away. And she says, well, just fly down on Friday and you can fly back on Monday morning. And at the time, I was at HUD. And I was at that time, I believe, Assistant Secretary for Congressional Relations, which again was a great, wonderful job. So I said, okay, I'll go. So I flew down Friday night, right from Reagan. It wasn't called Reagan then, but anyway, from Washington, flew down. She picked me up and she said, well, we're going to go, change your clothes and get casual, and we're just going to go out and get something to eat and maybe go to the movies, go to a chick flick or something. I said, that sounds fun, very relaxing. And I was really in a pressure job, so I really was looking forward to this. And it was good to get out of Maryland in this hideous snowstorm where there was nothing but, cars stuck in the highways. And so I said, well, let me jump in the shower. So I took a shower, and I had her daughter's bedroom, who was away at college. And so it was her daughter's bathroom, where there's a lot of, all kinds of beauty products and things. So I jumped in the shower, and I usually use mousse in my hair because I have very fine hair, and now it's also very thin, but at the time it wasn't quite so thin. And when I wash my hair, I always use mousse. So I went, oh, phooey, I packed so fast, and I forgot my mousse. So I jumped out of the shower, and I looked in the medicine cabinet where all the equipment was, and there was this nice mousse canister. So I grabbed it, got in the shower, and I foamed it up in my hand, rubbed it all in my hair, and then I rinsed it out, which is my typical, routine. And as I rinsed it out, I noticed there was hair coming out. And I went, oh, it wasn't just hair coming out. There were clumps of hair coming out, going down the drain. And I kept doing it. The more I did it, the more the clumps came out. All of a sudden, I picked up the canister, and it said, Nair Hair Remover Mousse. And all I'd seen was the word mousse. And I realized I had just massaged Nair hair remover all over my head. And the more I rinsed, and I was totally bald, and I got out of the shower, and I looked in the mirror. I screamed. My girlfriend came running into the bathroom. She went, oh, what happened to you? I said, I used Nair hair remover. Oh my gosh. So I got cleaned up. I was totally bald. And people, when I tell this story, they say, it never works on my legs. And I can say, well, it sure as heck works on your head. So anyway, she said, well, we can't go out to dinner. We can't go to the movies. I think we better go shopping for a wig. And that's what we did. We went shopping for a wig.
Wow.
So, and what that taught me, though, I mean, everything has to have, a lesson or a silver lining or something. This didn't really have much of a silver lining, but it taught me that just don't take yourself too seriously. Just go with the flow. And, some things in life are just not worth worrying about, and it's just not a problem. I wore the wig for till my hair got to where it was presentable. It was almost 6 months. So I had to wear a wig for about 6 months.
Oh.
Anyway.
No, that's an amazing message.
Just don't take yourself too seriously. And you've also, it's not all about you. That's the other thing. It's not all about you. Sometimes we get caught up in that drama and that ego, and it's not true. And you have a lot better experiences in life and enjoy life a lot more when you realize that it's not all about you. So another story was I was door knocking, and they always said, because at that time, this was back in the 70s and late 70s, early 80s, and they always told me, don't ever go door knocking alone, Audrey. You always need someone with you. And I said, sure. So I usually had someone with me, but if I was going from one meeting to another meeting or one event to another event and I had downtime and I was obviously in my district, I would stop the car, jump out, and I'd door knock. So in this particular instance, I was in that situation, and I was in the car by myself, and I had downtime for maybe like 45 minutes. So I just stopped the car and I started door knocking, going down this street. And I got to this one door and I knocked on the door, and I always had brochures with me. And at night, what you do, because you can't call people or campaign at 10 or 11 o'clock at night, so you sit with your brochures, and on some of them you say, so sorry I missed you, Audrey Scott. Or so sorry I missed you, please vote for me, Audrey Scott. They say you should always ask for their vote. So I would always have a pile of ones that said, sorry I missed you, and then just plain ones. And I always had a batch of both of them when I went door to door. So I grabbed my brochures and I went door knocking, and I knocked on this one door, and the door opened, and this man grabbed me, literally grabbed me, and pulled me into the house and slammed the door. And he said, don't be afraid, don't be afraid. And I said, I'm not afraid. And I said, I'm Audrey Scott. He said, yes, I know who you are. I know who you are. I want to talk to you about, and he had some kind of issue, transportation, affordable housing. I don't remember what the issue was, believe me. So I said, I just wanted, he said, I know. I want to ask you about such and such. But he said, the reason I had to grab you and pull you in the house, the reason I slammed the door is because I have a pet bird, and my bird flies loose around the house, and I didn't want the bird to escape. I said, of course, I understand. Everyone has pet birds that fly around their house. So I said, well, that's fine. He says, and I guess I must have looked like I didn't really believe him, and I was still a little concerned about the situation. And he said, no, I really do. He said, put your finger up. And he said, and like whistle, and the bird will come and land on your finger. Okay, I'm going, try to whistle. Anyway, the bird came and landed on my finger. Oh, I said, how sweet, that's so sweet. And he said, the bird will kiss you. He said, all you have to do, he said, no, I've trained my bird, and my bird can do all kinds of things, and my bird will kiss you. I said, oh, he says, just all you have to do is like pucker up and make a little kissing sound. Oh, okay. So I puckered up, I'm going, and the bird kissed me. And I said, that's so sweet. And then he says, fly away, Hermie, or something, and the bird flies away. So I got out of there and I said, I will never go door knocking by myself again, I promise. So about a week later, this is when I was running for Congress against Steny Hoyer. And we were doing a TV interview in Washington, and they had us sitting on stools, like three-legged stools, and the moderator was sitting in the middle. And so at the end of the interview where they asked us all about, earwax and all kinds of things, not earwax, airwax, which was a form of plane. But anyway, we ended the interview, and then the moderator said, well, I'm sure they've had some interesting experiences. And he said himself, the moderator, he turned to Steny and he turned to me and he said, for instance, what would you do? He said, if a woman answered the door in a negligee. And he said, of course, that wouldn't matter to you, Mrs. Scott. But he said, Steny, what would you do? And Steny said, well, I would just look over her shoulder and say, I'm Steny Hoyer and here's my brochure. I wouldn't make eye contact, he said. And the moderator said, well, that makes sense. So he said to Mrs. Scott, he said, that wouldn't bother you. So he says, have you had any strange or interesting experiences door knocking? And throughout the entire interview, he'd been very hostile to me. He was obviously very, very supportive of Steny Hoyer. And if you ask Steny Hoyer, he will remember this incident, believe me. And so the moderator said, well, tell me about any incident you've had door knocking. And I said, well, there was this one time I door knocked and this man pulled me into the house, slammed the door and asked me to kiss his bird. And I said, I was telling the story. And Steny goes, oh, and he fell off the stool. And the man behind the, the recording window there's going, cut. And I'm saying, what happened? What happened? That's what happened. And apparently I used a term that wasn't appropriate or something about kissing his bird. And but I said, well, that's exactly what happened. So anyway, that was another little memorable incident that happened in my door knocking in my political career.
Yes, moral of the story, always have a door knocking buddy.
Yes, always have a door knocking buddy.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so now that we've talked about your time in the public sector, I want to kind of shift into more of the Republican politics. So could you start off by saying a little bit of what you've done with the MFRW?
Well, first of all, the MFRW has been the absolute strongest supporter for me and for any other Republican candidate running in Maryland or any other state. I think that it's the women really organized and the ones that are the rank and file, the front lines, whatever. We just depend on them and they always come through. And one of the very first things I did when I moved to Bowie in 1966 was join the Bowie Republican Women's Club. And that was a booming group of very, very active women. There were over 100 members. 1 year our president, or several years, was Emmy Shilhan, and she was just, she was the dynamo. She would call people if they didn't show up to find out why they didn't show up. She would make sure everyone had a ride to the meeting if you didn't have a ride. She was a detailed person and just a tremendous leader. And she led us into all kinds of wonderful victories. So we, and I have to say, my victories, as long as I lived in Bowie, depended on the Bowie Republican Women's Club. And then as my district, and I left Bowie and went, countywide, they also, it was the Republican Women's Clubs in all the other communities that really helped.
Wow. Well, let's talk about this little hat you have here.
Yes, I have the Bay Club.
Yes, so what is your connection with Bay Club?
Well, the Bay Club is an organization within the Maryland Federation that's a little bit extra. You pay a little bit more money and to be a member of the Bay Club. And in return, you usually get special privileges. And when I was chairman of the Bay Club for many years for the Federation, and I enjoyed that. I really enjoyed it because what I did, and it seems to me that this is where I really shine, is planning special events. And we always planned one special event, at least one, each year for just the Bay Club members. So people would have an incentive to join.
Yes.
And one of the most memorable was a luncheon at Mitzi Perdue's penthouse at the Pyramid in Ocean City. And it was spectacular. She had the entire floor of the pyramid, the top floor. And first of all, the view was spectacular. The furnishings were spectacular. She had, each room was for a different country because Purdue used it to entertain foreign dignitaries and people from foreign countries who were interested in purchasing chicken. And so she had one room that was Asian. She had one room that was Middle East. She had one that was very Victorian. And so it was just a fabulous place to go and just explore. And as you came in the front door, there was a long foyer that had shelves along both walls, and the shelves were filled with ostrich eggs that she had cleaned out, and she had designed little scenes inside each one, and they were just amazing. So it was just like a museum. Then you would come into the main part of the penthouse, and she had this luncheon, and we all wore these hats, the Bay Club hats, and then we proceeded to wear these at every MFRW event we went to, and especially for the special event that was planned each year for the Bay Club members.
Wow, really awesome. So I wanted to shift in a little bit about the Republican women who've impacted you and your career. So can you name just one or a few Republican women who really made an impact in being a mentor in your career?
Well, I will say, obviously, Ellen Sauerbrey, but I also had a lot of support and advice from Audrey Holt, former Congresswoman. She was a tremendous help. Connie Morella, who's still a tremendous friend and colleague, she was too always available to me. And I would meet with them in their congressional offices, and they were always just had the best advice and also just moral support. And also some people that weren't elected, like Ann Granados, was a wonderful member of the Federation, and she was such a hard worker and also a great friend and a great supporter from Ocean City. And there's so many women. Joyce Terry's, again, from Calvert County. She was chairman of the MDGOP, and she was a role model for me. And then when I became chairman of the MDGOP, it was trying to live up to Joyce Terry's standards that really inspired me, and I think had a lot to do with my success. When I took over for the MDGOP, we had over a $250,000, maybe $300,000 deficit, and I took office in November, and with Kim Jones, who was my chief of staff, we eliminated and exceeded that amount by April. So it was just, also from November till April, I did nothing but work the phones. And that's how it's done, folks. That's how it's done. And Kim was a tremendous organizer, and she would sit me down every day with a list of names and phone numbers. And in most cases, she would also have put a suggested amount of the ask. And anyway, it worked, and we were successful in putting the party back in the black. And it was that was a very rewarding experience to know that we met that challenge and exceeded it. Every candidate has buttons, and I have hundreds of buttons, not only just mine, but also everyone else under the sun. I have a button collection, but these, of course, are two of my favorite. Yeah, my house is full of elephants of every sort, and I have never purchased one single elephant, but everyone gives me elephants, which is lovely, and I treasure them all. And this is just a collection up here of elephants that I've received over the years. But the center one is one I did purchase, and that's an ostrich egg from Africa, and it has the 5 key animals on it, which of course the main one is an elephant. And here, of course, is an elephant collection of all the tiny little ones that I've received over the years. And there's literally hundreds of them. And they're from, some of them from all over the world. And most of them I can tell you who gave it to me. And I just treasure those also because they represent so many friendships and so many different experiences.
Go ahead.
And I collect Beanie Babies, but mostly I collect elephants. And as you can see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 elephants in my Beanie Baby collection. This is what I call my brag wall, and these are all pictures from the offices that I've had. And when I no longer had an office, this became my office in my home. And this is one of my favorites. When I was a mayor of Bowie, I used to go to the schools and do a session on local government, and then the children would write me thank you notes. And this was in one of the thank you notes, and that's me. And it says, Mayor Scott has more fun. And I've always said, if you're going to do something, do it and enjoy it and always have fun. And this is Barbara Bush. She was wonderful. She came out and campaigned with me when I ran for Congress. We door knocked together, and we went to Prince George's General Hospital and visited the patients. And this is George W. Bush in the Oval Office. When I was Secretary of Planning for Bobby Ehrlich, we won a national award. And of course, this is President Reagan, President Bush 41. This is in the Oval Office. And I had several meetings in the Oval Office with President Reagan and then with President Bush. This is President Reagan and his family on his first inaugural evening before the inaugural ball. This is myself again with President Bush. This is with President Trump. This is with Governor Ehrlich. And I love this one because it says, I love you, Bob Ehrlich. It was a wonderful experience working with Bobby Ehrlich. And this is, of course, George Bush on the ranch. This was with Bobby Ehrlich in one of the commissions that I was on. Donald Schaefer, he was a character, a wonderful character. Sandra Day O'Connor, when she was inaugurated or installed as a Supreme Court Justice. And that was a wonderful experience. And over here, Jack Kemp, who was my secretary at HUD. And again, as I said, he was a great guy and wonderful to work with. This down here is a transition team for Larry Hogan Sr. when he became county executive. I was chairman of his transition team in Prince George's County. And then in the back row, you can't see it, but there's a picture of Larry Hogan Jr. When he was about 21 years old. And here I have, this is from the Governors Association. Oftentimes, Governor Ehrlich and wasn't able to attend governor's meeting, and he would send me as his representative or designee, and that was great fun because I got to know and got to hang out with all the other governors. That's Haley Barbour and Warner from Virginia. This is a picture of the funeral of Governor Reagan when they have the horse and drawn and the empty boot. These are certificates when I was nominated and I was the different secretaries. And this is from the Ehrlich Steel inauguration. And then there's another whole wall. This again is another wall in my office, and it's the plaques that I've received over the years. At least some of them, I have boxes and boxes of them in the basement. But some of these are the most important ones that really mean a lot to me. From the Bowie Health Center, where I was chairman for 27 years, and that Bowie Health Center was the hospital that we built in Bowie. And also one from the Maryland Municipal League, where I was president of the Maryland Municipal League. And that, again, was something that I really enjoyed. I interacted with the municipalities all across the state. And then my senior executive service, when I was installed into that at HUD. And I have also a Kentucky colonel from Kentucky, from Ernie Fletcher when he was governor. That was all part of the times that I was on the Governors Association and the Appalachian Regional Council for Bobby Ehrlich. And all of these are different ones, and presented from Dimensions Healthcare when I was on their board, and then an award plaque from BPW, Business and Professional Women, Woman of the Year. A lot of these are Women of the Year. And anyway, again, just bring back a lot of memories, a lot of really good memories, and of good people and the people that mean so much to me. And this is a real special memento I have. This is a piece of the Berlin Wall that happened while I was at HUD, 1989, and of course I treasure that and all that it represents. And this again is another favorite of mine. This is a judge cartoon. These are collectible. If you're at the RNC or if you go over to the Capitol Hill Club, you'll see a lot of judges framed on the walls there. So I have one in my house.
Well, so thank you so much for joining us. I just had one more final question for parting. What advice do you have for Republican women who are seeking to be leaders in the Republican Party?
Run for office. I have met and talked to so many women's groups, and I just want every one of them to know that they can do it. That and I get so frustrated when good Republicans run against other good Republicans. I would rather see them run for an office where we don't have someone running, if it's in their district, if it's within their ability to do that. And I just think that women need to support women. And it's something that I discovered very early on, probably in one of my first races with, at that time, the ERA was a big, big issue. And they were all talking about women support women. But I want to tell you, Democrat women did not support Republican women. It was, in my opinion, it was a fallacy that they were promoting. So I just think Republicans, first of all, too, let's stick together and, like Ronald Reagan said, we agree more than we disagree. Don't focus on the disagreements where we can't agree on an issue. There's more issues that we agree on, and most of the ones that we agree on are the important ones. Don't focus on one tree in the forest. Look at the forest. We need to be concerned about national security. We need to be concerned about education. Education is right now, in my opinion, a national security issue, because we are not promoting and we are not producing graduates who have the ability to lead our country, and we don't have the intelligence that is necessary to provide security. Because I just read an article where the United States used to be number 1, 2, or 3. Russia, China, USA, with math and science. Always Russia, China, USA. And we weren't always 1, we might be 2, we might be 3, but then we were 1, and those 3 kept alternating. And now the United States of America is 37th in the world on math and science, and that is just abominable. That is unacceptable. And we have got to turn this ship around. We have got to get our focus on education. Right now I'm involved with a group, a small group, and we're trying to get approval for a charter school, a classical charter school that focuses on the Western civilization, our founding fathers, cursive writing, phonics, and it's a hard sell, but the parents want it. You know, it's the teachers union and the superintendents that don't want it. So it's a battle that I think is worth fighting, but we all have got to get into this battle together. Education and energy are the 2 E's and the 2 most important elements to our future national security and the future success of our country.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Audrey.
You're welcome.
And this has been the first episode of MFRW Bayside Chats. Hope you'll tune in for the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you.